It really depends. I have some thoughts about that. It depends on how wide a record is, how wide the tables are, because there is a limit to what you can pull back with the data API, especially perform script on server. But Jonathan, yeah, the course works with data tables, and it teaches you how to fetch data using that data API, which you're already doing for your dashboard. So it's
So
my opinion, and I think it's a common opinion that that is a good generic way to fetch data. You could construct a script that will handle any data request, any data pull that you want. You just tell it what layout you want it to go on and what the query would be. So the query could be passed in, the layout could be passed in, and then a generic script could just go fetch the records
cool.
using this. So
Keep
Okay.
in
And
mind,
then
even if you are, um, so FileMaker caches the records that you pull down. So if you are writing any information to a field, even if it's a global, it will still write that data to the local machine. So if you want to speed things up, my recommendation is don't use global fields, use a global variable, and then reference it from there. And that will keep it all in memory, and that might also help speed it up for you.
interesting.
Also,
Especially if you've got any additional relationships that are based off of those global fields. You may not, because it looks like you're just dumping the JSON in there, but it, because then it's going to want to resolve those relationships as soon as it replaces it, and that can also give you some trouble.
Brad, what were you saying, Brad?
Oh, I was just gonna say, if you switch over to the data API, the one thing that you're gonna have to do is then change all your references and data tables to say the field data.
Yeah.
Or you could actually have, when I was first getting used to it, in JavaScript, you could actually conform. You could take that raw pull and conform it back into the format that you're currently using.
Yeah.
But JavaScript can do all of that faster than you can notice.
So this is the path using the execute data API to the city field. It's the field data dot city, which is just one path. It's not that big of a deal to go in there and change it. I know you have a dozen or so columns, but it's still not really that difficult. So,
Are any of your columns that you're pulling down, are they calculations or summaries or anything like that when you're pulling it down?
I don't believe, maybe just the age here.
No, that's probably not enough to really. I mean, that's the other thing to look at, because if it's got to calculate anything, which is another argument to use the data API, because it'll do all that on server and it's a bazillion times faster.
Okay.
yeah, I certainly don't.
Jonathan, is the data fairly static? Like it's not dynamically being changed by the user?
Yeah. I mean, most of the stuff is static. There might be a change here and there, but it's not something that
Here and
would.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the data is fairly stable. That's a really good candidate for pre-caching as well, right? So you can cache this data on startup.
Well, but the problem is that there are a number of different finds, though, of scenarios of what the list would look like. So you'd have to cache a number of different things, which I guess is still okay. But
Well, you could cache it as a big giant blob and then pass that in and then pass in the find as a function parameter and have JavaScript do that find, because JavaScript will do a find on the giant. Like, it's got all the data. JavaScript can do those finds super quick.
Yeah.
So one of my patterns has been to get it everything and let JavaScript handle the sorting, the filtering, and then I just have to set up functions for each of those things and have that be one of the things to get passed in.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
I think these guys
No,
are.
it's go with the data API. How many records are you trying to find?
Well,
Return
just
anyway?
there's 2,700.
Yeah, that's nothing really. I mean, well, for JavaScript certainly, but for a execute data API, I don't think you'll have a problem with that. You know, you remind me of something, and I haven't explored this
Lazy
yet.
developer tries to take the shortcut every time.
Do what?
The lazy developer tries to take the shortcut every time.
Yeah. Yep.
The shortcut that turns into a long cut.
The shortcut that allows you to move on with your life and do something else. So,
Yeah, what were you gonna say?
I was thinking about this idea because we've had conversations in the community before about fetching large amounts of data, and this conversation reminded me Mark's pulling 9,000 records and it's working just fine. That's great, but at some point especially if you're using perform script on server, you're going to get a limit. You're not going to get all the data. You're going to get an error that returns it. So I haven't ever.
So Jeremy, you're talking about there is a cap that in terms of the amount of characters that can be returned and it gets truncated. That's what you're referring to.
Yes. There's a truncation error. You'll see if you use perform script on server to run a query or anything, I think, and you return that found set as JSON, then you might run a limit. You might run into a truncate limit.
I don't think it will truncate it in that respect. My understanding is that it only truncates it when you are oh crap. I went through this. I think it only, I can't remember. Kyle is the expert on this. If you ping him, he can tell you exactly what's what there.
So all I can say, Jay, is that I have been bit by the truncation issue on this. There is a workaround, but I'm curious where Jeremy's going with this.
So we've talked a lot about this in the community, and a lot of people have suggested, and I think people have created this method of because you can use paging in the execute data API script step as part of the query, to construct a query that only returns 1,000 records, and then just keep calling that until you get all of the records. I think David Thorpe in the community was suggesting that. But then I read a blog post by Beeswax about the perform script with callbacks. I've never used this function, this script step, because I primarily deal with JavaScript stuff. So but I was thinking, like, is it possible? I think the blog post mentioned that they fire off like multiple ones of these. They're running a script for each one, and they let this one, again, I don't know how this works. I never tried it, but they are using this to run some sort of query, and then when that is done, the callback script gets run. And I was thinking, could this callback script be something that like builds a
Absolutely
JSON array?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then
I've used this for fetching for JavaScript. It's freaking brilliant.
It is. Okay.
Yeah, and the other, so you could do it for pagination, like you're saying, do 100. You know that there's 2,700 records, so you're gonna have to call the script 27 times, and when it comes back, you can't predict when it comes back. So if one comes back before the other, you may not get them in the same order as when you fire them off.
Okay.
But the way that I've done it with these large data sets is you fire this off, you save it in a non-global field on the server. Okay. The callback script calls back and says, hey, the data's ready. Here's the UUID for the data. And then your callback script goes and gets the data as in the client side, and then you don't have a truncation issue. So both will work. But if you're not been playing with this is a game changer, because the user continues to use the device, use their client, and there's no spinning wheel. So
what I was thinking, Marcus, is it would be interesting to construct data tables. So in this example here, watch this how I set this up. I'm not actually getting the data here in my load script. I'm doing what we've talked about before. I load the web viewer with the data tables library, and then data tables itself goes and fetches the data.
Sure.
So, and this is using is it using FM Gopher? So that's nice. I like that. I was wondering, maybe I could get the web viewer to call this perform script on server with callback. And every time the callback is triggered, it actually runs through the library's API to add records to the table.
Mm.
So so it would be funny.
Yeah, I don't see why not.
You'd be looking at this, and then all of a sudden, records would start popping in between the ones that you're actually viewing. That may be disconcerting, but it is an interesting idea. Actually, what is happening here? I think I built I built a paging mechanism using data tables.
Right.
So every time,
Yeah.
So I'm only returning 10 records at a time.
Which is going to be super performant.
So what I did is I overrode, I'm only passing it 10 records at a time. I'm passing it 11 through 20 of the 206. If I change this to 100 records, then it's going to cause the fetch data to run with a new parameter where my limit is now the same number that's over here in this dropdown. So that's really nice to be able to do. But anyway, I was thinking through this, and I like this callback idea.
Mm-hmm.
You're already using it, Marcus. It feels like it could be useful for it is useful for large data sets, as you have shown.
And Jonathan, this is how I was caching for large data sets, is I was using this function so that when the user loads, it just fires off this script, and it's just using perform script with callbacks. So the user just continues to kind of, because some of the fetches were taking a minute and a half to get the data back. So I didn't want the user to be sitting there waiting that whole time. And this is brilliant. So now the issue was managing that glob, because now that glob is data outside of FileMaker. It's now in memory. And so how do you push changes back and manage the updates? Because we've got this massive glob that takes a minute to form. So that ultimately killed this development, and they went a different direction. But I was pushing down the road of how we could manage that as well, and I was coming up with some interesting ideas around how to do that. And it was working. The problem was it was breaking often as well, and so the customer eventually got frustrated. And then I just want to do this in vanilla JavaScript. I don't care, or vanilla FileMaker. I don't care if people are waiting. I'm like, okay, it's your code.
Oh. So data is certainly an issue, and it's the hard part of working with it. It's FileMaker that's the problem, not the web viewer or the JavaScript. So,
well, FileMaker is not designed to be this asynchronous kind of platform, right? So now we're forcing it into this asynchronous world, and all the workarounds that you need around that, right? So.
Oh, well, I hope that answers, and always continue to reach out or continue to.
Hope you guys also get some benefit out of the more introductory questions too. So thank you.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's